Hi folks, Joey Ricard with TracksideScenery.com. Welcome back. What you're looking at is Cass Scenic Railroad's Shay number 6. It's shoving our train up the hill today. I'm showing you some of my footage of the Cass Scenic Railroad because I want you to see how extreme the landscape is there. Now surely not everyone is going to model terrain this steep and rugged, but I do, and this is the area that I model. And I'm showing you this first because otherwise you'd think I was a nut. I mean, come on. If I was modeling this scene you're looking at right here, and it didn't have any trees or ground cover on it, it would look like a staircase. I know, not many people would model a layout that had a right-of-way this steep. As a matter of fact, our current layout doesn't have any grades on the railroad right-of-way at all, but there are a lot of steep transitions towards the front and the back of the layout. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, the methods that I use, they're not new. There's nothing new about them. As a matter of fact, we're going to take a look at how I use these methods to create believable scenes. You see, the truth of the matter is, you don't even have to have any grades on your layout to create a believable scene that appears to be that of a steep mountain railroad. Try to keep in mind that it's the flavor or the representation that goes a long way to convey a sense of place for the area you're modeling. That's why this video is not necessarily a how-to video, but more of a discussion or a look at scenery techniques that I use. I'll also go over why I use the techniques I do. You gotta start somewhere. There's a lot of different ways people envision what their final layout's going to look like. Some folks use a layout design software and some folks draw or sketch. I happen to use a combination of both. I tend to do what most folks probably consider backwards. I draw sketches first and then try to fit it all in a space that usually ends up being too small. These are photocopies of some pencil sketches I did a long time ago when I first envisioned the spruce cullen timber layout. And here you can see how I made some graphics that helped me get a better idea of what I really wanted to do and how much space I really had to work with. So why am I showing you all of this? Because it's going to take some imagination to take your layout from looking something like this to something like this. Or from something like this to something like this. But have no fear, because if you can't move outward, you can move upward. Hey, I'll be the first to admit it's easy to stay in Lumberyardville or Plywood Central Town. But still, I've never figured out why taking it to that next step, or the step beyond that, or the step beyond that can be so intimidating for folks. I don't know, maybe some folks think that they'll actually get finished, but there's always something to do. Now, this information applies to all model scales. I just happen to be modeling an O scale. Now look here, this is the early stages of an old HO layout of mine. And as we make our way through the video here, you can see the different types of materials that I use. This is the blue insulation foam that you can find almost anywhere. I use different thicknesses of the blue foam. In a lot of cases, I just stack the blue foam and then carve it down. I use a lot of different techniques for shaping the blue foam. I use a saw, a knife, a hot knife. I also use a real messy technique that involves a rotary wire brush and a drill. You don't need to know about that. It doesn't really matter what you use as long as it works. And the truth of the matter is, you're probably never going to see what's underneath that landscape ever again, so it doesn't have to be pretty. But I will tell you, when I took a portion of one of my layouts to the dump one time, I found that screwdriver that I was missing. Well, in this discussion, we don't have time to talk about all the different types of materials or all the different techniques you could use. This is an old portable module I was working on a few years ago, and on this particular one there was grades on the railroad right-of-way. As you can see, I used blue foam as the base, and that's drywall I used for the roadbed. Yeah, sure, on a portable layout it may weigh a little bit more than plywood, but it's a lot easier to work with when you're hand laying track. Because my design was sketched out and not written in stone, you can see I used flex track here to help me decide which way I wanted the track arrangement. Once I had everything laid out the way I wanted, I went ahead and secured the drywall. I took a lot of scrap blue foam and pieced it in there between the track to make the terrain. So that's just a quick example of using two different types of materials to gain elevation. And if you notice, it's not much elevation, especially in contrast to this monstrosity. As you can see, this is stacked and layered blue foam that we carved down with the wire wheel and a drill. Obviously, we pre-cut the pieces as we stuck them on there to get them as close as possible to the right size. And then it was the wire wheel! Ha ha! I'm telling you now, the wire wheel method works great, but it's a mess. Okay, so the question remains, how do we go from this to this and make it as easy as possible. Because this is a traveling display layout and it's in pieces, it has to be as light as possible, and it's got to fit in this trailer. So for this layout, I used a technique that's called blah blah blah. Feel free to name it if you like. It involves the use of plaster over screen wire over vertical contour pieces, and you'll see what I mean in a second. You see the vertical pieces of blue foam that were cut to shape, then you see the screen wire over that, and then the plaster over top of that. That's what I'm talking about. Blah blah blah. Why do it this way? Remember, this is a discussion. Because in all honesty, it's a lot easier than stacking blue foam and trying to cut it to shape, especially in a small area like this. The biggest benefit for us in this case is the fact that it actually absorbs shock better than any other method I've used. Now, of course, you wouldn't necessarily need this on your home layout unless you live in an earthquake zone, but to me, it's a lot easier to work with. Now, I know there's a lot of different people that watch these videos, and they all have different skill levels. So with that said, we're going to pick up partway into the process here. Now, I'm not going to make some big list of stuff you have to have because you can use whatever works. In this case, I'm using 1-inch thick blue foam that I've cut to shape, and I'm using regular construction adhesive. Now, I don't know if you can tell from the video, but on the left-hand side is where two sections of this portable layout meet. Now, that flat piece across the back there that I'm gluing to, the backdrop actually goes against that on the opposite side. You may or may not need that on your home layout. In other words, I'm using it as a wall. I don't have a set number of vertical pieces that I stick in there. I will, however, put enough in there so it'll support the scenery above it. And I'll also take into consideration how my terrain is going to be shaped. Now, you see how steep this hill is here? Think back to the beginning of the video when I said if somebody saw this first, they'd probably think I was nuts. That's a steep hill. Over here where the tunnel is, I've created some supports to hold the scenery above it. In this case, the tunnel's going to have a liner, so above it I'm going to create some contour pieces that fit in that small area. Now, as you can see, I cut everything to fit on the fly. There's a lot of guys that would go nuts doing this. As we move over to the other side of the layout and start putting the screen on, I do want to remind you that this is a discussion about this type of scenery technique. As I was filming the clips for this, I did think about doing a step-by-step tutorial version of this how-to video, but really I don't think it's necessary. You can really see how easy it is. There are a couple different types of screens they sell at the big box stores. I'm using the thicker stuff, the kind you can't just poke your finger through. As you can see, I'm using a stapler to staple the screen to the wood. Even though the staples are 1/4 inch long, sometimes they don't hold the screen in place on the foam there. So if it doesn't, I go ahead and put screws in, every few inches. I just use old screws that I have laying around. I will go through after I get this secured and cut off some sharp edges. The plaster that's going to go over top of it is going to hide any seams or edges. So don't drive yourself nuts trying to get everything perfect. You can cover it up. On this one section here, I probably used about 10 different pieces of screen. You're not going to take one piece and cut it to fit. That would take you forever. Well, you can do it if you want. As this is a discussion about this type of scenery technique, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the plaster that goes on top. I use plaster of Paris, and I make a paper mache mix with newspaper. I usually put 1 to 2 layers of the paper mache on there, and then I use plaster of Paris to frost it like a cake. No kidding. At that point, you can fill in any gaps or any missing areas with the plaster. Once it dries overnight, I can go back over it and fix anything I didn't get right the first time. And once it is to my liking, I'll go ahead and put my patented Joey Ricard dirt-colored paint on there. Once we get to that point, we're ready to add rocks. And as you can see, I got plaster on there. Rocks, we're going to cover rocks in an upcoming video. Now, make me proud. You guys know what comes next, right? Yep, dirt. I'd be disappointed to know that you haven't seen our video on using real dirt. Yep, it's right here on our YouTube channel, along with a bunch of other videos, including applying the dirt, and also those weeds you see there. We talk about those. Now, I know there's a lot of people that watch this that are obviously at different skill levels, and that's why I chose to make this more of a discussion format with a little bit of how-to. Obviously, there's guys that are experienced, and I hope that if you're watching this, you just enjoyed the video because it's model railroading. But I also hope it motivated those that are new to the hobby, and also those guys that are good with electrical and mechanical, to take that next step. And for those that think they have no room to build a layout, What you're looking at here is O scale, and it's only 24 inches wide by 42 inches long. So if you're tired of looking at all that plywood on your layout, get up and get at it. It's easy. We have some really cool projects we're working on, so stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to the channel. This is Joey Ricard with TracksideScenery.com. Thanks for watching. See you next time.